This conversation with Jericho warms my heart. Jericho is so light and inviting, and we spent so much time laughing. It was such a gift. Her reflection on her relationship with self expression, magic, and her creative process had me asking all the questions. This was such a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome to the Devoted Way podcast, all about magic and miracles from me, Sora Schilling. It's time to hone in on your intuition, become masterful at energy work, and live life based on your design, your unique blueprint encoded with stardust from the ethereal realm and from those that have come before you. You know what to do and how to be, so trust in yourself. This podcast series is part of a 13-day challenge called Stellar Transformational Act of Reverence, otherwise known as STAR, hosted inside of our devoted Discord. In each episode, I will randomly announce a keyword that you can use to earn points and win amazing prizes during the challenge. Stay tuned until the end of the episode for more information. Jerico Mandybur, who goes by the pronouns they, she, is a multi-passionate best-selling author and award-winning creativity coach and consultant. Their books are Neo Tarot, Daily Oracle, and the New Deck Pleasure Oracle. An accomplished editor and writer, their work has appeared in publications like Vogue, New York Times, The Guardian, Elle, and more. Jerico was the host of the podcasts Self-Service and Beyond Belief, is a registered meditation teacher, and reads tarot professionally. Her mission is to help women and NB visionaries unlearn perfectionism, own their cringe, and liberate their joy through intuitive, creative expression, so that they can tell their story, make their stuff, and change the world for the better. Hey, Jericho.
Hello.
You want to tell everyone where you're calling in from?
Yes, I'm calling in from Gadigal and Wangal country, which is called the Eora Nation here in Sydney, Australia.
Beautiful. And how long have you been in Sydney now?
I've been here since late July.
Has it already been that long?
Yeah, a huge chunk of time now that I think about it, but it feels about 2 months in my head.
Absolutely. Do you miss LA? Because I know you lived there for a while.
There are a lot of things about it that I do miss, like the food and just the beautiful friends that we had and so much stuff going on, the pace. But the majority of things I don't miss, and especially being in lockdown there for so long with COVID and everything. And here, touch wood, it's been really well managed. So it's a breath of fresh air to be here, to be honest. But I love them both.
Yeah, I can see why you would love both. And in the middle of this particular time period, why it makes sense that you are totally fine with being in Sydney. So tell me a little bit about, all right, give us a picture of Jericho when she was like 8 years old.
Oh my gosh. Okay. 8-year-old Jericho, very inquisitive and curious, all the neurons firing in the direction of mysteries and UFOs and like religious phenomena, just anything that was a little bit spooky, a little bit witchy, a little bit magical. I loved reading about it. Do you remember in like the Victorian era, there were those 2 girls that faked pictures with fairies? It was like two sisters.
Familiar.
Yeah, they made these really realistic cutouts and took photos, and photography was very new, and the whole of Europe just like went wild over these images. And of course they turned out to be fake because they were just little dolls cut out of paper, but I just like poured over things like that. I was like, ooh. And yeah, so I was reading a lot, and I was just outdoors a lot, playing and enjoying life.
That is so fun. Oh my goodness. And did you have, let's say, like a group of friends that were also totally into everything that you were into?
No. No, I had no friends. I had people that I was in class with and knew. I had a cousin who was in my grade in the same school.
Yeah.
But I didn't have friends. I would wander over to people and be like, "Hi, do you like, ancient Egypt?" And they'd be like, "No," and kind of walk away. So I was very alone, but I wasn't lonely because I was having so much fun in
There's a
my head.
difference for sure.
Big difference. And you know, I was blessed with having a kind of a lack of awareness of social skills. So I didn't really realize that it was like a bad thing, if that makes sense. Like I was aware that I would kind of get rejected by people a lot, and that did kind of make me sad. But I always just had that kind of, it seems like I was born with that belief of just like, I'm my own person, like I'm unique, and if people don't like it, that's fine. Like I really had that little spirit. So I always stayed optimistic and smiley, even though, there were times when it did get me down, especially when you move into high school and things get a bit more serious, things get like more gendered and more sexualized. And so then people are like making fun of you and like really, physical ways. And like, that's really shit. So yeah, it definitely had like a painful streak. But I don't know if it's because my mum is kind of similar to me in that she's a bit eccentric and she's very like happy and proud and just doesn't care what anyone thinks. And she says, "Oh, don't worry," But I kind of have always just had that. So yeah, I was totally alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I had a very rich inner life.
I love listening to guests talk about when they were little because, yes, part of it could have been your mom, right? And I love the fact that your mom was eccentric and she didn't care about what other people thought. And yet, you could have come into this life being vastly different from her, too. But rather, you came in having very similar qualities that allowed you to stay in this place of inner joy and place of inner wonder about life, which I think is incredible. And I find that that's you now. So can you share a little bit about how that 8-year-old Jerico now translate as to adult Jerico?
Yeah, well, there was a huge, broken, burning bridge in the middle of those two types of Jericho.
Okay, well, that's good
In
to
which,
know. Yeah.
yeah, like it was not a straight line of joy. There was, just a lot of like self denial or faking, of like different kinds. And I never felt like I wasn't being myself. But as I kind of got into like very young adulthood, like left home and things like that for the first time, I was fascinated by things that were, like I say, like spooky. And so you kind of just put those things in boxes. So my box that I placed myself in was like, okay, I'm a bit dark, I'm a bit goth, not a lot of people like me. And so I just took on all these, identifiers, and it kind of became my allotment, and so I didn't let myself feel like that joy and silliness and playfulness. I was like, I am a serious intellectual, because you just start, and I don't think I did it in like a very, you know, coming from a place of low self-esteem. It was more just that it's like when you grow up and you see alternative angsty characters in movies and you relate to them because you're like, I'm an outsider. They're often queer coded, so it's like, that seems like me. So then you just be that, even though that's not actually you. So yes, I was very cynical and like smoked constant, like just chain smoked for, over a decade. And so there was a lot about me that I just put away. And I was like, I'm a serious, I want to be taken seriously. So I'm going to be a serious journalist. I'm going to have this like awesome career. I'm going to prove everybody wrong, because I wasn't very like, I didn't get good grades in school.
But you're an exceptional writer.
Yeah. And I always have been. So like, I don't know why teachers didn't ever, affirm any of that for me, but I kind of had to realize that myself after a long time of doing it. And, so I kind of just got to a point where like that wasn't working for me anymore. I was burnt out. I wasn't fulfilled. I didn't feel that joy. And I realized like, this isn't who I am. Like, it's not who I am when I'm alone. So why is this how I'm literally living my life publicly? Like, this will be my life. I will die like this if I don't like find that inner light and express it. So that was a big challenge that got me to where I am now, which I think is a path back to that 8-year-old. It's been a homecoming and a really beautiful kind of like shedding of the stuff that feels like a should rather than an essence of me.
Yeah. And isn't that growing up? Like, I find that we all put identifiers on ourselves, or I'll say personally, like I put identifiers on myself throughout my years of elementary to middle to high school to college to my 20s to my 30s, because I was still trying to find myself and see where I fit, right? And that it was through the not fitting where you find the gems, where I was like, oh, wait, the places where I don't fit are the juicy areas that I could finally embrace with myself, but had to go through those hardships of feeling just plain out awkward in every way. I would not want to go back to those days ever.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Like, my friend asked me the question the other day, would you rather be given $50,000 now, just like no caveats, or go back to your childhood and do it again? And she was like, because somebody else heard that, and she was like, no question, I would just take the money and run. And I was like, I think I would actually go back because I have no regrets, but I'd love to go back with the adult brain that I have now and just fucking live, and just really go for it and do all the things that I, didn't do because I was like, that's not my, that's not in my identity, or I'm too shy or whatever. So yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it?
I think that the question should have been, would you take the 50 grand now, or would you have the opportunity to go back without actually remembering anything that you knew?
Yes.
Right? Like,
that is an existential question.
Like, if you already knew and then you went back, yeah, for sure, I'd live life so differently. It'd be so fun. But if you don't remember, why do it again? I like
Absolutely.
where I ended
up. Yes, agree. Yep. I don't want an unconscious repetition for no reason.
Totally. I find that we each have a particular challenge in our life that comes about in different ways and can be very interesting. And at first, it feels like an existential crisis where you're like, can I just get over this? But after a while, it actually, when it shows up for me, I'm like, oh, it's this thing again. Okay, I'm ready to learn something new. And I get a little bit curious and excited that it's showing up. And I wonder for you, what is that one thing that shows up in your life to just continue to help you deepen into being the fullness of you?
Yeah, for me, it really feels like self-expression is an area of challenge and growth and like a doorway to like mastery of some kind in this life for me. Like, I did my human design in a reading for the first time the other day, and I was a manifesting generator 3 and 5, which is a martyr heretic. And so there's a lot about like reputation and what you're putting out there that comes with that. So I really, really related to that because one reason that I think I've always been a writer and drawn to writing, aside from that I have like a natural aptitude for it, is because it's kind of a safe, private way to express. It's not super risky. You can make the decision, like, who am I going to show this to? In what forums is this going to exist? But it's very different to going up to people, let alone, you know, getting on a stage or using your voice to be like, I'm here, you know. And so for me, like, self-expression is something that like I'm like drawn to like a magnet, but it's like the ocean. Like, I want to go in, but I also know how scary it is. And it's kind of something that I have to respect and get to know and kind of like form some kind of a relationship around what is that energy that wants to come out of me. Why does it feel so big, you know, and potentially threatening? And just to kind of like walk, like to push myself up to that edge, that growing edge, and kind of like meet myself at the point that feels the most edgy without, you know, opening the floodgates, which, you know, what's the worst that could possibly happen? But with basically without overwhelming myself into retreat. So I'm constantly just trying to like go step by step in the direction of just like a real liberation of my voice.
You've given me a really good reframe, because isn't it so interesting? You said, you know, I can totally write because you can choose who sees it. And if you want, no one needs to see it. But speaking, let's say, in front of an audience is a little bit more edgy. Not that you can't do it, but that it's because there's a lot more people out there that are then seeing and feeling and hearing you. Versus I'm completely the other way around with it.
Wow.
Because I had a story, and still it's there a little bit, that I'm not a great writer. And what I feel and think it's like so much faster than I could put into words. So it's much easier for me to be in front of people and speak and use my voice. And thinking about writing really sometimes creates a lot of anxiety in me. So the idea of, well, no one needs to see it, it could just be a personal expression, is very helpful. But again, so interesting, the difference, right?
Isn't it? Oh, we're so complex and so unique in our challenges and what we find the most edgy. But yeah, I'm so glad that you take that out of it, because that's what writing has absolutely been for me. Like, it's just been about deepening my relationship to myself first and foremost, and getting everything out that's in my brain so I can actually see it and make sense of it, because otherwise it just feels like a whirlwind. And you know what the mind is like it's just like a radio that will not stop. It's so repetitive and annoying. So I've just been, you know, since I was like 12, in the habit of just getting it all out, and it's so cathartic and purging, and it brings me so much insight into myself that I wouldn't have otherwise. And yeah, like, I wouldn't have survived without doing that. So, you know, it doesn't have to be about anyone but you know, you and the pen.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I find with you, and tell me if I'm wrong, self-expression comes in all ways with you. I feel like self-expression happens with writing, with what you share publicly and privately, you know, design and aesthetic, like all of these different ways. And so for those out there that are listening that are like, okay, yes, I want to express more, and their immediate thought is, I need to write a blog post, or I need to go and find somewhere to speak. Whereas I think of self-expression comes first and foremost in expressing yourself in all other ways too. So what would you say? What is your advice around how do you tap into understanding of self through multifaceted ways, and it doesn't have to only be writing or speaking?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I think I would say, like, start with what, you know, getting a deeper and truer like look at what self even means. So, you know, like, what lights you up, like what genuinely brings you so much joy that, you know, again, has nothing to do with the rest of the world or how it's perceived. Because I think, you know, being in the era that we're in, we immediately go to like, okay, how is this going to look? How is it going to sound to other people? Like, what's the packaging? But I think the truer and more personal and more authentic that you make something, the more universally it resonates, because people don't relate to something that's like this polished, you know, thing that has an energy of like, I'm just doing this because it looks a certain way. People relate to your experience of like your life, what's in your heart, your dreams, your desires, like your pain, like people see themselves in that, like that is the mirror, that is like the truth that just cuts through and like touches people's hearts. So to understand yourself and like what's actually there, what feels really good and what feels a little bit hard is, yeah, just it's essential. You just can't bypass that. Like that's your embodied experience of life and your emotions and your soul. So whatever gets you closer to that, like it might be yoga, it might be knitting, it might be writing, it might have nothing to do with something that actually feel like looks like anything you've seen. But the more time that you can spend in that state of like flow and connection to yourself, the more that you'll come out. And you know, when you have that opportunity to express something, it's just like boom, it's there, it just flows, rather than having to be constructed like it's some product to sell. Because you know, while a lot of us do sell things, like it's you, it's your life. Like you can't just put yourself in that box.
So true, to be like coming full circle. And you're right, you just then are, right? There's like nothing to it but then you just being you. There's a different feeling of when you're trying versus when things flow, meaning because you're just in full embodiment. So I wonder, in your, you know, very witchy ways and your specific way of relating to the unseen realms and being fully you, can you share a story of a time that was like so freaking magical or serendipitous or synchronistic that you're like, wow, magic is for real?
Oh, I love this question. I mean, I feel like I have these moments all the time.
All the time, right? Me too.
Yes, and that's what you want. That's the way to live. So let me think of one. Okay. There's a couple of ones that I can think of from childhood, and they're both kind of random but funny. So the first one is that I was like kind of petitioning the universe for like a sign, like something to deepen my trust. It was in a really just like dark place because I was like, you know, and I had this dream, and it was just like it was me going to the beach that was closest to my house, my father's house, and sitting up on the cliff and it was almost like in The Lion King where he talks to his dad. It was like a talking to God kind of dream. And so
amazing.
Like then a little while afterwards, like maybe like 2 days, the same weekend, we were at the beach and I was like, let's go up to the top of the cliff. And my dad was just kind of following behind me, like, where are you going? And I was like trudging up there. And I got up there where the ocean was, and like right under, like very close to the shoreline was a humpback whale and its baby. And they were just playing and breaching. And we were the only ones there that saw it because it was like 6 a.m. And it was so stunning. And I was like, thank you. Yes. You know, it was so dramatic. Like spirit is not ever that performative, but it was.
It sometimes can be quite performative, but that's like
yes,
the ones that you want to always happen. You want that cinematic, incredible experience from the divine. And usually it's not always like that, but when they do, that's insane. What a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it was so, so gorgeous. I still think about it all the time. And the other thing was, this is the more silly one, but when I was like in early high school, I had like a few warts on my hands and fingers, as like kids do. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to like visualize them before bed, dropping away, dissipating. And so I just kind of like got into this trance state as I was falling asleep at the same time, and just imagining them like disappearing. And in the morning, they were gone. Like I feel silly saying it because it sounds like I'm like some kind of like showboating, you know, like magician, but they were gone. So, you know, it is what it is.
That's amazing. I love hearing stories like that, right? Because often many of us hope that magic is real. Many of us believe internally at some place that magic is real, but our mind and society constantly wants us to prove that it's real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the needing to prove that it's real is what creates the no magic in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I feel, even sharing those stories. Like I don't want anyone listening to think, oh, okay, like I'll have something like that happen and then I will, give my life over to the universe and trust spirit, because sometimes you'll never have proof of anything, like,
or if you just stop thinking that you need proof, then things will start happening and you'll allow yourself to really ground into the possibilities. I don't even want to say that it will prove anything. It's just a different way, a different perspective of how to see it. And I do think that sharing stories, yes, in some ways, sometimes can limit people because they're like, oh, I want that. And sometimes it can be inspiring as long as we put the little caveat that doesn't have to be your experience.
Yes, very, very true. And it took me a long time to, because after both of those incidents, I was similar aged. And I spent like the rest, of that decade just being like, more, prove it again.
Totally.
And that did not work. It kind of really went quiet. And so, it took a long time to get back into just that connected gratitude, frequency of just like, these are my values. Like, this is my anchor in life. It's not about evidence or about anything except that, like, this is what I believe and this is how I want to live. And then, like you say, once you let that go, then amazing things happen anyway.
It does. And what a great remembering for others and myself and everyone to hear, which is it's not about it being a show. Like when you're like more, you're basically trying to force Great Spirit or the Great Mother to do something for you just for the sake of performance, when that's completely not what they're doing. They're gifting you with a miracle. And so the gratitude should be enough for the next like 30, 40, 50 years. Like that it is.
For sure. Yeah.
But we get to this place of like expecting and demanding, which is part of our programming. And so I love what you were speaking of, which happened to me too. I had a big wake up call to like humble me. And I got really quiet for a long time because I was like, yes, ma'am. Like I don't know anything. And you schooled me on life and I am ready to just be quiet and, take a moment. And so I think it is really important to remember your gratitude and your own personal agency and power to just stay within yourself versus looking even externally for
That's right.
other signs.
Yeah, absolutely. We are spirits and a part of spirit in the same way that you might think about, ghosts or angels or aliens, like that is us. Like there's, whether you believe in like a hierarchy of that or what your cosmology looks like, it's not out there, There are some beautiful experiences that you'll have in relationship, but if you can just kind of like, humble yourself while remembering your agency and your power and how much is actually inside that you have to work with, there's no like kind of projecting that lack or that expectation onto, another force.
Keyword, third eye. Third eye.
Absolutely, yeah. Tell me a little bit about your creative process, because I know that you're an author and you create an amazing tarot deck and then now an oracle deck, and and just the way you share your words and your wisdom out there in the world is such a creative process. So how does that work for you? How can we be inspired with our own creations based on your path?
Ooh, well, there's no one process really. I think in honesty, it just oh, good. I'm glad.
I don't usually have a process, but things usually work itself out.
That's it. It just works itself out. And I really don't. I know there's a lot, you know, in putting out offerings of any kind, there's a lot of messaging around consistency, but I'm not a consistent person, you know, and so I don't do anything if like you know, the muses aren't there. I just wait until, you know, I'm thinking about the thing. I'm like, that sounds, you know, I have some things I could say about that. That's really interesting thread to just follow. And then because I'm so in the habit of just bashing out words constantly in that like, you know, therapeutic way, I usually just like blah, 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 send. And that's it. Like, I don't reread things. I don't want to think about like the structure and, you know, come from that copywriting approach, because that's my whole career, you know, and like it's very dry for me to be like, you know, how can I structure this better so that, you know, I get more engagement? So I tend to just be like and hope for the best, and just trust that if there's something about it that is inspiring me, that will come across. And yeah, like there's this UK coach called Lucy Sheridan, and she talks about expression and particularly social media, because, you know, that's such a part of our lives, in like a dolphin metaphor. Like sometimes you're submerged, you're doing some like personal work, or you're resting, you know, you're in your life basically. And then other times you might be like popping up to service and be like, hi, like it's me, you know, like you don't have to live at the surface where you're posting 5 times a day and thinking of like, what can I say? You know, if you don't have anything to say, don't say anything. That's okay, you know. So my process is just kind of like following how I feel on any given day and like what feels interesting to me, and just sharing it from that place of like, I literally still feel like that 8-year-old kid who's like, do you like ancient Egypt? You know, I'm just like walking up to people being like, hey, I've got something to say. So yeah.
Completely. I think that knowing that you don't have to be on all the time and giving yourself permission not to be in this crazy day and age is some sage advice. Because you're right, we have to live life, not just pretend to be living life. And when we are living life, we're most likely not on socials. We're not most likely behind the computer because we're living life. Still, it may be safely indoors, depending on where you are, but that's okay. You can still do other things. And at the same time, knowing not to say anything until you have something to say, I think there's some importance to that. Like we can take that in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, there's so much noise in general in the world, you know, in our modern Western world. And I think pretty much every global and personal problem would be solved by listening.
Yes. Yes.
So just intentional communication, you know?
Exactly. Rather than there are ways in which one can be performative, ways in which one's uncomfortable in the silence and therefore needs to feel like they need to say something, one that feels that they may be forgotten. And so they just have to keep being available to be seen, right? There's like all sorts of different things that happen with that. But yes, to more listening. If right now in the current time period, based on your own lived experience right now, if you were pleading for people to listen, what would you want them to be listening for and about?
Well, I think there's like no situation where deep listening isn't helpful, you know, because obviously there are very loud, powerful voices in the world, and they're voices of oppression, you know, and the systems that are in play are designed to drown out the, you know, the voices that aren't even quieter, but just aren't historically listened to. And so, you know, first and foremost, like just, you know, listening to the people that you might not have blaring down, you know, the phone screen or the television screen or the radio. But even compassionately listening to people that you might have a story about being an enemy, you know, like what's actually going on there? Like what are they saying under their words, and how can that help us dismantle their pain? Because, you know, that's what anger is, and mostly it's just expressions of anger. And, you know, disenfranchisement of one form or another. And I think because the world is the way it is right now, like people all feel like one of the things we probably all have in common is that we don't feel seen and heard and understood, you know? And so it's like, it's so simple, but it's also true. Like we just want to be compassionately witnessed and listened to. So I think there's no situation that I can think of that wouldn't solve a lot.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I've been thinking about this question for myself regarding the first place is there's so much noise. And for me, the past 2-3 years has really been about having the silence enough to listen to me, like to actually claim my own voice, know what my thoughts and feelings are, what were my lived experiences, what do I see or feel when I see someone blaring something at me? Is it true? Is it not? Am I conscious to it? Am I just letting it go? Like what's happening? And then from that place of then realizing the polarity is causing the problem. So where can I not polarize, but where can I look at the both ands and see compassionately what that means for me? And so, yeah, thank you for that.
I love that. You know, that's so true. Like, again, starting with the self, like what would it look like to really listen to your heart, your body, like what's actually going on? You know, our mind is just as much that foghorn of distraction. So yeah, that being in your power is just, you know, listening to your own authority and seeing what's really going on for you and what that means in terms of your, you know, communication and relationship with everyone and everything around you. Yeah, I love that.
I feel like you probably know much about pop culture. Am I right or wrong?
I do.
Okay, cool then. I'm not one to know much, so if you ask me these questions, I wouldn't probably not be able to answer, but I feel really called to ask you these questions, including like if you were either like a video or a movie or a TV show, what would be yours? Like amplifies like who you are in its fullness.
Oh my gosh. Such a good question. Okay, so I'm thinking Labyrinth.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes, I'm thinking Pippi Longstocking.
Yes.
And Pretty in Pink.
Oh my gosh.
That's so the trifecta.
So good. Yeah. Okay, if we play that game with music, what would you say?
Oh, that's a real, wow. Oof. Okay. Gosh, that's hard. I can't think. Okay. Somewhere in like the realm of like somewhere where Enya like crosses over with like Leonard Cohen and like New Order.
I could totally see that. Yes.
I love this pop quiz.
Oh my gosh, that was so good.
That's so funny.
Oh, I love it. Because like growing up in middle school, you know, it was like Depeche Mode and Erasure for me. So like the fact that you brought in also New Order would be so good. And Enya, too good, too good. Oh my goodness. All right. And then I need to take a moment because they were such good answers.
I want to know your answers.
I don't know if I would be able to come up with the answers. I'm awful.
It's hard on the spot.
And things like that. Like pop culture, usually I'm always like, what? Who? And growing up, I was not allowed to watch TV and I never had cable. So the whole MTV genre and era where you were able to see like, you know, songs with videos, completely I missed.
Yeah, I didn't have cable either, and I feel like I missed a lot of like good music programming. But in Australia, very late at night on Fridays and Saturdays, it was like from like midnight or 1 p.m. to like 4 a.m. was when they played the music. So I would just stay up really late. Secretly.
No way, that is so good.
Found a way.
Yes, my goodness. So is there anything that you're currently binge watching that we all should be, you know, paying attention to?
Ooh. I don't know about paying attention to. It might be an acquired taste, but I watched the Avengers movies recently, and then that led me to watch these new Marvel shows that are online. So WandaVision, that was beautiful. It's, it's part of it includes characters from the Avengers, but it's really creative and poignant and nothing
I
like,
haven't watched that yet. So, okay.
It's great. And I don't think you really need to have the full backstory to enjoy it. And without giving anything away, it's a television show, and it starts with a 50s kind of Mary Tyler Moore sitcom, and then it kind of moves to Brady Bunch aesthetic and structure, and then it moves to Full House kind of style, and
I
then
can see why you
90s.
like it, because it's touching on pop culture.
Yeah, it's all these references, and it's so exciting. Yeah, I love that. And there's a witch in it. So.
Excellent. I'm down. I shall watch that then.
Good. Yeah.
And if there was a magical tool that that one may be open to exploring, what would that magical tool be? One that you've been resonating with?
I mean, tarot is the obvious one for me. It just really never ceases to impress me. It's just the gift that keeps on giving. It's so deep. I feel like it just contains the entire history of the world. It's so great. So tarot and oracle cards I recommend to everyone. Journaling is the other thing that I also recommend to everybody. And then in terms of other tools, well, I've been reigniting my passion for meditation in the last few months, because I was really big on meditating, in my 20s, and then I stopped again. And I got this chair. And you know how, one of the reasons I think people don't meditate is because it's uncomfortable physically. But they have these chairs now that fold out, and there's a really good sturdy back on them, so you can just lean back and sit in your chair, and it's so comfy. And I've never experienced that before. So now I just sit back in my chair and I feel my spine is supported. This is luxurious. So I don't know if that would count as a tool, but I feel called to mention it.
That absolutely counts as a tool. Well, I often find too, yes, granted, like you in my 20s, I could sit for hours and hours and hours. I was actually totally fine with it.
Yeah,
nowadays with my body, not so much, a little ouchy. And so to have a tool where you can be comfortable and you don't have to suffer in pain, that's not necessarily required in your spiritual practice. So if you can ease some areas so that you can drop in, I think that's an exceptional tool.
Yeah, it's really, really life-changing in a lot of ways. I highly recommend. I feel like if everyone had a really good chair, we'd all be meditating,
Maybe that's a cause for you to take up.
Yeah. The chair course. Yeah. No, I'm all for it. I just want to tell everyone about the chair.
Excellent. Okay, one last question. These were more quick questions. So the last question is, what does devoted mean to you?
I think for me, it's just living in that as much as, possible in every moment, in that mindful, intentional, connected space with what's going on around me. So that for me, looks like, the land that I'm on, the elements, all that classic witchy stuff is really important to me, because it just brings me back to, the wholeness of everything. The fact that I can just kind of take a breath and remind myself of all the ways that earth and fire and air and water I'm constituted of that stuff, I think that feels devotional to me, because it means that I can, everything that I kind of think and do and is kind of a form of saying thank you. The more that you can kind of channel that joy and have that sense of like play and like creativity, like whatever it looks like if you do it from that kind of place of just, like gratitude, it doesn't even feel like the right word, but just like, I am, like we said before, I'm a spirit in this world of spirits. I'm part of this, and not forgetting that, it feels like the best thing that you could do, in your relationship with the universe, with Goddess, with like anything that you work with. They just don't want to be forgotten, And so I think it just looks like living and doing everything that you do, because life is full of, washing dishes and like things that are mundane, but doing it in that place of, can I sing as I do this? Can I have a conversation with the universe as I do this? And just not forget our whole problem, as humans, is just like being totally disconnected from our bodies, like forgetting that we're more than just like a head in a jar, forgetting that we're not separate, like so much stems from that like great forgetting, that I think just like living in that place of connectedness is the most devotional thing we can do.
So yummy. May no one be forgotten.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerico, for today.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure chatting. I'm obsessed with you.
Likewise. We'll have to do this again.
Yes.
All right. Blessings to you.
Oh, bye.
It is a blessing to serve you. My deepest desire is to bring nourishment to your soul, activate and enliven your inner landscape, and find inspiration through the sacred stories of others, so we remember we are collectively woven. If you're currently playing with us in our devoted Discord, remember to submit the keyword and complete the other moves to earn points and win amazing prizes. If you're not playing yet, visit devotedway.com/star, STAR, to sign up. If you would like to listen to more Devoted Way podcast episodes, watch Devoted TV, or read about mysticism, spiritual devotion, magic and intuition, or creating a prosperous new world, I invite you to enter our virtual temple home at devotedway.com. As I continue to serve, may I humbly ask for a sacred exchange. I would so appreciate it if you would write a love note, otherwise known as a review. Share the episode with your friends and community members, and engage with me on Instagram. Stay sacred and discover your path and join the Devoted Way. May magic and miracles occur in your life every day as you co-create a prosperous new world with the Great Mother. Until next time, this is Sora Schilling.